Pleasure to be here. Thank you so much for inviting me. I've been cooperating a little bit with the CDG Association here in Portugal, with Vanessa and all the team. I'm sure you are all very familiar. And so I'm going to present you some results of a study that we've conducted with families of CDG patients, and also emphasizing this dimension of coping that you talked. I hope you all can see the the screen. Yeah. Okay. So just a brief introduction. I don't want to spend too much time saying things that you all already are very much aware of, but this idea that chronic illness, any kind of chronic illness, does impact a lot on families, pediatric chronic illness, on families, and mostly on parents of young or adult children that experience a lot of different stresses. And we know that very often, I'm sorry, I'm just trying to put the screen so that I can see also. Okay, so we know that very often diagnosis is difficult, is lengthy, and is very stressful. Other thing that is common in rare diseases is the experience that many of the health professionals that families encounter are not aware or are not well trained to deal with the specific disease. And so this is also something that is perceived as stressful. And families also deal with the difficulties of getting the necessary information. So we can say that there are a lot of similarities between different rare diseases, but also and such specific disease is different from the others. A study that was conducted by the World Association have shown several important highlights, and this study was conducted with families but also with health professionals and researchers from 20 countries that work with CDG patients and their families, and they highlighted this need for information, the quality of healthcare, the psychosocial support, but also the representation in healthcare policies and research priorities. Departing from this knowledge, we conducted a study already in 2018 to better access the daily demands and challenges that parents of CDG children face, and also what were the main coping strategies and support that they could find. We conducted a study with interviewing several families. I don't want to bother you too much, but just to give you an idea, we had 26 mothers and 7 fathers of 30 patients, a little bit all over the world, several countries. And we tried to find the most common dimensions in these families. The first question was, what are the main demands and challenges that you have faced or are facing now? And of course, some were related to the disease, trying to understand the disease, to get more knowledge, more information, and also to evaluate what kind of expectations one can have about the future, but also more daily to daily aspects of the management of the disease. Another group of challenges had to do with the relationship with health and education professionals. So you have all the difficulties of finding the best expert that you can access, and also the best team in terms of health, but also in terms of education and complementary or supplementary therapies like speech therapy or butter therapy or so on. Then you had the financial burden. Of course, this is very common in all chronic illnesses, and it depends on the country and the kind of service, health services, social service, but for all families, it meant some form of financial burden. Many parents complained about feeling lack of support. Often we found families that were one or the two parents were the only caregivers. They could not find much support in other family members or friends. They identify difficulties in the social integration of the patient, usually for teenagers or adult patients. They experience difficulties in time management because they had to deal with all those different tasks from their personal life, professional life, dealing with the issues related to the disease, and also just to be parent of this child and other children. And some families, some parents describe friends turning away, the experience that friends didn't really know how to support, and so they became less and less frequently contacting them and finally turning away. And all these demands contributed to experience of emotional regulation difficulties. So the experience of anxiety, of specific fears concerning the disease and the future of the child, sadness, feeling of loss, multiple worries, several worries that were always changing and burdening the daily life, and sometimes feelings of loneliness. We also asked parents to fill in a questionnaire about parenting stress. This is a questionnaire that usually is used for parents of children with chronic illness. And we identified levels of stress concerning different dimensions, and also the difficulties in dealing with these stressors. So we have here the emotional distress as being the most difficult for families, but although they felt important stress, they were a little bit more able to deal with it. On the contrary, for instance, when you see the medical care and the role function here regarding the multiple role functions of being a parent, a professional, a caretaker, and so on, it was not so stressful, but it was a little bit more difficult. So this led us to think about coping. What do you do to cope with these situations? And so what are coping strategies? Coping is a word that in the English language you use in common language, but in psychology we have a special meaning for this word. We mean how people deal with stressful situations. So when we face new and difficult situations, we often experience stress or other emotional negative reactions. And this is because we evaluate these situations either as threatening or harmful or discouraging, or in any case demanding more resources than we consider or we think are available to us. We know the experience of parenting a child with a chronic condition is filled with situations where parents feel this threatening or too demanding situations. And we also know from research that continuous stress can impact our health and well-being. So it is important to support parents in dealing with this stress and emotional distress. When we go back to these results, we see that they are higher comparing to other groups of parents that have children with cancer or with obesity or with inflammatory bowel disease, except for the emotional distress, where in this group it was a little bit lower for the difficulty in dealing with emotional distress. So what this shows us is that probably these parents have developed some effective coping strategies and are dealing with some flexibility to this situation. On the contrary, as I said before, for dealing with medical care and role function, it is a little bit more difficult for them. So when we study coping strategies, researchers have organized them in several groups, but one of the most classic is this division in problem-focused, emotion-focused, and positive reappraisal. So when we talk about strategies that are problem-focused, as the name says it, they include strategies that we engage to try to overcome or solve specific problems. We can search for information, learn new skills, plan, obtain instrumental support and help, and so on. Emotion-focused are strategies where we try to regulate our emotions, the stress and emotional distress. So when we think that the problem cannot be directly solved, it is effective to search for emotion-focused strategies. We can use positive thinking, minimizing, spirituality, hope, distraction, several emotion-focused strategies. Positive reappraisal involves strategies that change the meaning of the situation. Sometimes what we do is that we try to find new meanings for the situation. And we can do this, for instance, by positive reframing the situation, or, for instance, trying to normalize the situation. When we ask the parents what they do to deal with the difficulties and the stress and the emotional distress regarding parenting a child with CDG, we found that parents have a well-balanced group of problem solving and emotional focused strategies. So there is a little bit more of problem focus strategies, and then emotion focused, and then reappraisal, but they use a combination of several strategies. And research tells us that this is pretty effective. So this is a good way to solve our stress and our emotional distress. Detailing a little bit more what did parents tell us. In terms of problem-solving strategies, several parents described working one day at a time. Each day I wake up and I see what is my problem today, what do I have to deal today, and what is the best solution? Do I need to get help? Can I have a good solution to this situation? And this is very effective. Many parents say that trying to think one day of a time, or just thinking about the problems that I have to deal now, and not think that much in anticipating other problems, can be effective to help parents deal with the situation and feel organized and in control. Other kind of strategies involve learning specific skills or trying to find some forms of support from others. Several parents told us about arranging developmental stimulating activities for the child. Parents are these parents that we talked with were very much focused on the compensating eventual difficulties or development problems, and they found that all kinds of development activities could be useful. Speech therapy, but also, for instance, physical therapy, occupational therapy, sometimes just swimming or language lessons or things like that. Other kind of strategies involve searching for information. We'll talk a little bit more about this, or learning new competencies. I can learn with other parents that experience the same situation, how I can deal with this. For instance, how I can navigate the health system. How can I be sure to be getting the best support for my child. Also, parents talked about normalizing the situation. What does this mean? This is a word that we use in psychology, and it deals with our efforts to try to find what is normal in situations that are especially difficult for us, and highlighting these aspects. So I find my child is happy, or she is well in school, or she is able to play, or we are happy as a family. So these are all experiences that families that do not have a child with a rare disease also experience, and feeling that we share so much of this experience are useful for me. It gives me some form of support. Searching for personal and family balance. This is difficult for every parent that works. We are also dealing with this now, with this pandemic situation. But of course, if you have a child with special health needs, it's much more difficult. Obtaining social support was often mentioned. Social support, we know that is very effective. Research has shown that families or persons in all kinds of difficult situations that can gather social support are more emotional, positive, more controlled, and more effective in dealing with situations. But often you have to engage in different strategies to find this social support. It's not something that comes easy for you, and you probably know very well that you have to make specific efforts to gain this support. In terms of changing the meaning, it's a little bit this finding the silver lining in each experience, trying to find the positive dimensions, and several parents talk to us about the positive aspects of their life as a family, what the disease had brought to their family in terms of positive experience of learning, of gaining more empathy, of receiving support and friendship from others, and so on. And also strategies to minimize problems. It's also a cognitive strategy. It's not solving problems, but perceiving them as not so important, being able to contain the suffering and the distress that some kind of issues bring to us. So now I would like to highlight two of these dimensions that I think are especially important and that parents talk to us as being especially complicated. One is searching for information. We know that information is critical for us to deal with any new and difficult situations. When facing a new situation that we find stressful or difficult, we always try to find information. What can I know about this? What can I learn about this? And so many parents talk about the importance of gaining information, or when we ask them, what would you advise other families in the same situation, they would say, get more information, try to find information. So this is an opportunity. Information helps me to get some form of orienting. What can I expect? What can I do? What does this mean? These symptoms, for instance, what do they mean? What kind of evolution can happen? And this helps to adapt my expectations and also give me some perception of control. If I know what this is and what is the possible evolution, I can gain some control over the situation. But these same parents also told us that sometimes information can be also stressful, because sometimes information is too complex. This is a especially difficult group of diseases. You need to have some health literacy to understand what happens in terms of a lot of our systems and organs. And most of us, if we are not medically trained, can have some difficulty. Also, often parents told us that the information they could find was not appropriate or adequate for their specific situation. It was sometimes very general, or sometimes dealt with other types of CDG, for instance, or was not, they could not relate this information to the specific situation of their child, and this was also difficult to understand and to accept. Also, it was interesting because parents told us that sometimes information was too negative. The first things I can find in the internet or doctors tell us are too negative, and then we have found that the situation was much less negative than what they told us at first. But some parents also said they tried to give me a very optimistic framework. And now, this was, for instance, I remember a parent of a child that already was a teenager, and he said, I would rather they would give me a more realistic framework so that I didn't have so much higher expectations. So this is difficult to adapt. How can people that are delivering information give the best information for each specific case, and how can people that are trying to find information find the right information to them and not be too much overwhelmed or stressed by a lot of information that are not relevant, that is not relevant for them. So the other issue that we also found was complex was this searching for a balance in the personal life of parents. On one side, parents felt the need and they wanted to dedicate time, energy to the child, to help the child have the better treatment, the better management, to be well integrated in schools, to receive all kinds of support that the child could need. And this involves a lot of time consuming tasks, work, talking with a lot of people, going to several consultations, gaining new information, and so on. On the other side, parents felt the need to maintain some personal and professional life. Many parents said, for instance, I only work part-time, but this is very important for me because this time when I'm at work, I can be a professional and not a mother or a father or a caregiver. And this is really difficult, and is something that we found is different from country to country. When interviewing people from different countries, we found that and of course we all know that, but this is felt in every situation. In some countries, social support, medical services are better organized. People are entitled to receive more support, either financial or technical or professional in any kind. In other countries, this is much up to the parent or to the family to deal with the situation, or at least to find the best solutions. When we ask parents what are the most difficult situations for you, most of these situations are related to the child and not so much with them. So this is something that associations, patient associations, professional associations, and so on have to emphasize. I think it's important to emphasize because governments and national organizations need to be aware that this is too much work, too much stress, too much difficulties for each individual parent, and this is the role of the whole society and not only of the families. Many families, or most families I would say, are very much aware of this, but in some countries this is particularly difficult to find this kind of support. Beyond coping, which is more personal strategies, parents also identified resources, external resources that they found particularly useful. It's certainly not new for you when we say that associations, patient associations, or family associations were identified by all families as critical in the support they have received. They also talked about other kinds of support, like family, co-workers, the partner, other community, friends, and so on. But associations CDG associations give a special kind of support. And so people talk about, for instance, finding an online group with people with the same disease, or finding this idea of meeting every year. Although it was difficult, it was also some very important time to regain some energy and some hope and some sense of control over the situation. So this was something that was important to understand. Also, several parents in several different countries talked about health and social service as a positive resource. So I already talked about the difficulties, but we talked with several families that were able to find a good health team. And so they found that they knew that when I talk to my doctor, she understands me, she hears me, and she's always there to support me. Social services, and here also including schools. When children are in school and the child is happy in the school and is well supported, this is something that is felt as an important resource. Also, some parents talked about the patient himself or herself as a resource. We found this very interesting because we were not hoping or expecting to find this result. But several parents told us about the child. Sometimes it was a young child, sometimes it was an adult child, and the fact that she was in a good mood most of the times, that she was developing well, that she was progressing, that she was happy, was something that helped parents feel the love of the child, of course, but also motivation to go on and gain some energy for understanding and observing the improvements and the progresses in the well-being and in the development of the child. We think this is one of the dimensions that helps parents gain control over the situation. We know that there is not a cure or a specific treatment for the disease, but these children, like all children that have other diseases, can make a lot of progresses and then can improve and can reach some level of good quality of life. And when parents see this happening and see that this results in large part from their own efforts, this gives them a sense of efficacy and helps them go on to be motivated. So briefly, we can conclude that parents of children with CDG of all ages experience multiple stressors. These stresses are much common from parents in several countries, and these stresses are mainly related to the illness and to the need to balance their parenting and their caretaker role with other personal roles. We were also able to understand that at least these parents that we talked with were able to find a diversity of effective coping strategies and to use the available resources, showing flexibility and ability to adapt. This is important because research, the most recent research has shown that more important than using a specific coping strategy, what is more effective is to be flexible, to have this available several coping strategies, and to be able to find the best strategy for each situation. So sometimes it's very good that I confront the problems and that I try to solve difficult problems and get all the support, all the information to solve this problem. Other times it's more effective to try to find a new kind of balance, reframe the situation, getting emotional support or social support, because the problem will not be easily solved, and we have to use other kinds of strategies. As I told before, CDG associations play a critical role in this adaptation and are a critical resource for most families. So, thank you for all of you. It's obrigado in Portuguese. It was a pleasure. I wanted to thank Julia for inviting me to be here. And I hope this made some sense for you. And of course, if you want to ask some questions about this.
Thank you so much, Luisa. That was absolutely brilliant. I'm just going to put a gallery on so I can see everybody. I wanted to say that this is a really affirming study, I think, for parents, because I've been nodding my head all the way through. I can really relate to the challenges and the demands that you mentioned that other parents had said had been placed on them, and I think especially that we are assumed to be the experts. We're assuming the experts. That's a really big thing, and the fact that we need to be aware of a little bit aware of some health literacy is also really important. But it's encouraging to know that people all over the world are in the same sort of situations. The mums and the dads as well, because I know you had some dads in there too. And I think you're right to say that we have developed some coping strategies, and I even thought that this here now, what we're doing now, is problem focused. We're trying to find answers, so we're all here doing that. That's a strategy, and those two issues that you said were really complex. I think that hits home quite a lot. I think we can all relate to the problem of finding the information, but having it in a way that we can understand, and also trying to balance life, looking after our CDG child, our other children, our jobs, and friends, and a social life. And also I thought it was interesting that you said that 15% of families found the child themselves a source of support, which I think is really true, because our children, I mean, I'm biased, but I think they're absolutely adorable and definitely make us happy, and that's really interesting, because I'd imagine that maybe in other diseases or disorders that might be a different percentage. I mean, I'm not sure. But thank you very much for being part of our social support.
I just wanted to say something. This percentage, well, this was an interview, so people talked about what was most important, but also what they remember at that moment. So we didn't ask. I'm sure that if we asked parents, is the child a support for you? Many more parents would say that. So these were the parents that spontaneous, when we asked what helps you more, what's your support, they talked about the child. But we found this interesting because I think all parents think about this, at least in some periods of their life, in some moments. Well, the situation is difficult, but it's so good to see that the child is well and is progressing. But sometimes we tend to forget that, and all parents described I remember in the interviews that I conducted, but also I didn't conduct all the interviews, of course, but I read the transcript of all of them and I worked through them. Parents, only one parent told me, I am concerned because I see that my child is suffering. It was a child that was having pain and they didn't have yet identified what was causing pain, so they couldn't solve the problem. But all the other parents would say, she's happy, he's doing well, he has friends. We were also, I didn't present the results here, but we also interviewed some patients, some teenager and young adult patients, and they were very positive. It was very interesting. It was a little group, so I cannot generalize, and I know that each situation is a different situation, but it's something that you learn from the situation. Maybe one thing I would like to share with you was when we submitted this paper to be published. It's finally getting paper. It was a lot
of... good. I was going to ask you, did you manage to get it published? Because I know you were looking for a publisher.
Yes, it was really difficult, but finally we are really in the final steps. But one of the reviewers, of course, it was some person that was specialized but didn't know the disease, and ask some questions that I said, well, we really need to talk with these parents and see this, because one of the things was, why do parents talk so much about the difficulties concerning the child and not about their own difficulties, their own difficulty in balancing? I thought, well, that's interesting, but that's probably because they have, this is what is most important for them at this moment. So this is something that I don't have any lesson to give to anyone about this. Of course, everybody has to do their own way and work, but I have learned from parents that I talked to. And some parents told us how important it was. And I remember one parent that told me, when I was, when the child was really young and we knew about the diagnosis and were trying to understand, a health professional told me, your child has a disease, you don't have a disease. And this was 10 years ago, and it was what he remembered most. It was useful for him.
Yeah.
And it helped him understand that he wanted to do everything he could to help the child, but he also had to think a little bit about his own well-being and balance and so on. But of course, this is very difficult. Mm-hmm. Also, as you know, I've been working a little bit with the Portuguese Association, and I know that all of you together are very concerned with gaining awareness of the society as a whole. And I really think it's important, because even professionals that you work with every day, but maybe it's difficult for them to understand what are your preferences, what is best for you. And so the CDG associations have this important role to help the society and professionals to gain this awareness, because this is not a problem of the family, this is a problem of the whole society, like all other illnesses and the rare diseases and so on. But sometimes, in some countries at least, this is not true. So it's very much up to the family to find the solutions.
Yeah, yeah, we have a lot of work to do. Yeah. As CDG UK, definitely. Does anybody have any questions for Luisa?